Before prophecy, before music, before the sun crossed the sky, there was Apollo. He was one of the most complex gods in Greek mythology, a god of light, of truth, of healing, and of sudden destruction. Apollo was born to Zeus and the Titaness Leto. But his arrival was not peaceful. When Leto became pregnant, Hera forbade any land from offering her refuge. She wandered across the world, rejected everywhere, until she reached the floating island of Delos. There, beneath a sacred palm tree, Apollo was born, after his twin sister Artemis. Ancient tradition tells that Artemis helped deliver him, linking the twins forever, moon and sun, wilderness and order. From the moment of his birth, Apollo was associated with clarity. Unlike darker or more chaotic gods, he represented illumination, not just physical light, but intellectual and spiritual light. He revealed truth. He exposed hidden things. He brought order to confusion. But Apollo was not gentle. Like his sister, he carried a bow. His arrows could bring sudden death, often through disease or plague. To the Greeks, this was not contradiction. Light reveals, but it can also destroy. Apollo embodied this balance. He was beauty, he was harmony, he was prophecy, and he was the sharp certainty of truth. Soon after his birth, Apollo sought a place to establish his authority. He traveled to the slopes of Mount Parnassus, where a sacred spring flowed, but the site was guarded by a powerful serpent, Python. Python was not just a monster. It represented an older force, a chthonic presence tied to the earth and ancient prophecy. According to early tradition, this serpent protected an oracle that existed before Apollo arrived. Apollo confronted Python and struck it down with his arrows. The act was more than a victory over a creature. It symbolized a shift in divine order. Many scholars believe the myth reflects an older earth-based cult being replaced or absorbed by Apollo's newer Olympian religion. After slaying Python and spilling sacred blood, Apollo required purification. He did not destroy prophecy, he claimed it. On that same site, Apollo established the sanctuary of Delphi, which would become one of the most important religious centers in the Greek world. At Delphi, a priestess known as the Pythia spoke Apollo's words. People traveled from across the Mediterranean to consult her. Kings asked whether to wage war. Cities asked where to build colonies. Individuals sought guidance on personal decisions. Apollo's responses were often mysterious, clear in meaning, yet open to interpretation. This reflected his nature. Apollo revealed truth, but humans still had to understand it. One famous example involved King Croesus of Lydia. He asked whether he should attack Persia. The oracle replied that if he crossed the river, a great empire would fall. Croesus assumed it meant his enemy's empire. Instead, it was his own. Through stories like this, Apollo became associated not only with prophecy, but with the limits of human understanding. He revealed, but did not simplify. Truth, like light, could be blinding. Apollo was not only a god of prophecy, he was also the patron of music. Ancient poets describe him carrying a lyre, an instrument that became one of his most recognizable symbols. According to tradition, the lyre itself was first invented by his half-brother Hermes. Hermes offered it to Apollo, who mastered it and made it sacred. Through music, Apollo represented harmony, not only musical harmony, but cosmic order. To the Greeks, music reflected balance. Proper rhythm mirrored the structure of the universe. Apollo therefore became associated with clarity and proportion. His music calmed, organized, and brought peace. He was often shown surrounded by the muses, divine figures who inspired poetry, song, and knowledge. Together, They represented intellectual and artistic creation. But Apollo's connection to music also reflected discipline. His art was structured, measured, and refined. This distinguished him from more chaotic forces in mythology. He represented controlled expression, beauty guided by order, emotion shaped by reason. Through music, Apollo embodied the idea that harmony sustains both nature and human life. In early Greek tradition, Apollo was not originally the sun itself. The sun was personified by the Titan Helios, who drove a chariot across the sky each day. But over time, Apollo became increasingly associated with light and solar imagery. This connection grew stronger in later Greek and Hellenistic traditions. Apollo came to represent radiance, clarity, and illumination. He was often depicted with shining hair and youthful beauty. Light surrounded him as a symbol of truth, revealed. To the Greeks, sunlight exposed what was hidden. It made things visible. Apollo therefore became linked to knowledge. Just as light removes darkness, Apollo removed ignorance. This did not mean he replaced Helios completely. Instead, the roles blended. Apollo embodied the intellectual meaning of light, understanding, reason, and insight. This reinforced his position as a god of clarity, where confusion ended, where truth emerged, where knowledge illuminated the unknown. Apollo was believed to be present. Like his sister Artemis, Apollo carried a bow, but his arrows were not used for hunting. Ancient Greek poetry describes Apollo striking from a distance, bringing sudden illness or plague. In the opening of Homer's Iliad, Apollo sends a devastating sickness upon the Greek army. It is written that Chryses, a priest of Apollo, went to the Greek camp during the Trojan War. His daughter Chryseis had been taken captive by the Greeks. He offers ransom and respectfully asks for her return. Most Greeks agree, but Agamemnon refuses and humiliates Chryseis publicly. After being rejected, Chryses prays directly to Apollo. He calls upon the god using sacred titles and asks for justice. Apollo hears him, and then Homer describes one of the most cinematic divine entrances in mythology. Apollo descends from Olympus, carrying his silver bow with arrows rattling behind him. Homer describes the arrows sounding in the darkness as the god approaches. It's ominous and terrifying. His arrows are described as invisible, yet deadly. He strikes from a distance. First mules die and dogs die. Then men begin dying. The plague spreads through the Greek camp. To the Greeks, disease often appeared without warning. A healthy person could suddenly fall ill. This unpredictability was attributed to Apollo. Apollo's plague stops only when Crius is returned and sacred balance restored. But Apollo was not only the bringer of illness, he was also a god of healing. This dual role reflected a deeper idea. The same force that causes imbalance can restore it. Apollo governed both. His son Asclepius would later become associated with medicine, but Apollo himself remained tied to health and purification. He could punish, but he could also cleanse. This made Apollo a god of balance. Apollo was often described as the ideal of youthful beauty. Ancient Greek art portrayed him as tall, balanced, and serene. Unlike warrior gods, he was shown calm rather than aggressive. His appearance reflected harmony, proportion, clarity. To the Greeks, beauty was not superficial. It indicated order and balance. Apollo therefore represented physical perfection aligned with inner harmony. Yet many myths show that beauty did not guarantee happiness. Apollo experienced unfulfilled love. He pursued Daphne, a nymph who wished to remain free. As he approached, she prayed for escape. She was transformed into a laurel tree. Apollo honored her by making the laurels sacred to him. Victors in athletic and poetic competitions were later crowned with laurel wreaths. This story reveals another dimension of Apollo. He represented ideal beauty, but also the distance between desire and fulfillment. Even the god of harmony could not control love. This reinforced a central theme in Greek mythology. Order exists, but life remains unpredictable. Apollo was closely connected to the Muses, the goddesses of inspiration. Together, they represented knowledge, poetry, and artistic creation. Apollo was often given the title leader of the Muses, guiding their song and maintaining harmony. This connection made him a patron of learning. Poets invoked Apollo before reciting verses. Musicians dedicated performances to him. Scholars saw him as a source of clarity. To the Greeks, inspiration was not random. It was divine. Apollo provided structure. The Muses provided creativity. Together they symbolized balanced expression, imagination, guided by order. This reinforced Apollo's broader role. He was not simply a god of music. He represented intellectual clarity, where ideas formed, where poetry emerged, where knowledge was organized. Apollo was also associated with purification. After killing Python, he was said to undergo rituals to cleanse himself. This detail reflected an important Greek belief. Even divine acts required balance. Violence, even when justified, created impurity. It disturbed the natural order. Apollo therefore became linked to cleansing and renewal. Sanctuaries dedicated to him often included rituals of purification. Water, fire, and sacred offerings were used to restore harmony. People sought Apollo not only for prophecy, but for relief from guilt, illness, and misfortune. He represented restoration, light removing darkness, music restoring balance, truth clarifying confusion. These ideas made Apollo one of the most philosophical gods in Greek thought. He did not simply act, he corrected. He returned the world to order when it drifted into imbalance. Among Apollo's most tragic myths was the story of Cassandra. Cassandra was a princess of Troy, gifted with extraordinary beauty and intelligence. While accounts differ, many accounts, including Apollodorus, say that Cassandra agreed to be Apollo's lover, and so Apollo granted her the power of prophecy. She could see the future with perfect clarity. Cassandra accepted the gift, but then rejected Apollo. Apollo could not revoke a divine gift once given, and so Apollo transformed the gift into a curse. He did not take away her visions. Instead, he ensured that no one would ever believe her. Cassandra foresaw the fall of Troy. She warned of destruction, of betrayal, of death hidden within the wooden horse, brought into the city. But her warnings were ignored. To the Greeks, this myth carried a profound meaning. Truth alone was not enough. A person could see clearly, yet still remain powerless. Apollo therefore became connected not only to prophecy, but to the burden of knowledge itself. His gifts could illuminate reality, but illumination did not guarantee understanding. Sometimes truth isolated those who carried it, like sunlight that reveals what people wish to hide. Apollo's symbols reflected clarity, harmony, and light. The lyre represented music and balance. Its measured sound mirrored order in the universe. The laurel tree became sacred to him after the story of Daphne. Laurel wreaths later crowned poets, athletes, and victors, honoring excellence guided by harmony. The bow symbolized precision and sudden action. Like Artemis, Apollo could strike from afar. The sun represented illumination and truth. Though not originally the sun god, he became closely linked to light. The raven was also connected to Apollo. In some myths, it served as a messenger, a bird associated with knowledge and foresight. These symbols formed a unified image. Apollo was clarity. He was proportion. He was the balance between reason and beauty, where light revealed truth, where music created harmony, where knowledge emerged. Apollo was believed to be present. If you enjoy uncovering the deeper meaning behind ancient myths, subscribe to Ancient Untold Stories, because the oldest stories still illuminate the world today.